So every week I've been doing this series, I've been doing a little bit of an update on the Russia-Ukraine situation, so I figured I would keep you guys in the loop, and a lot of stuff has gone on. Like last week, Ukraine just came in, took 6,000 kilometers of territory, really messed things up. And so Russia obviously had to respond to that, and they're responding by activating their version of the draft or military mobilization. If you don't know what the draft is, basically it's when the government starts going around to people that didn't volunteer for the war and saying, guess what, pal, grab a gun, you're heading to the front line. It's not very popular with people, believe it or not. We've only done it in like World War I, II, and Vietnam. But that's what's going on. They're getting desperate for men to the point where they're going to start grabbing people that don't want to be there and making them fight a war. Russians are protesting and fleeing the country as Putin orders a draft for Ukraine. So drafts are never popular. Taking a bunch of people and sending them to the front line when they don't want to be there is never something people are stoked about, but I feel like it's especially unpopular when it's a war of aggression. At least when they're drafting people for World War II, you're like, I have to go save the planet. If I don't do this, the entire world's gonna fall. It's an important thing. You got national pride. They attacked Pearl Harbor. This war, if you're a Russian, your president just decided to attack the country next to you. It's not going well. So now you've got to hop on a bus and go fight a war that you don't really care about. I understand why people aren't that thrilled about it. And especially with how bad the Russian military's been doing, I'm not surprised people are fleeing. I'm an American, if for whatever reason there was some huge war and the American military had to start drafting, at least I know I'm getting good equipment. You got people in Russia being sent right now with weapons from World War II, body armor that's just literally thin plates of metal in a plate carrier. I would not be stoked to head to a war zone where I'm getting clapped and I know that my, division commander's been secretly taking all the money for the equipment that's supposed to go to me. I think Putin bit off quite a bit more than he could chew. They do have to mobilize because if they don't, they're going to lose, and that would be insanely embarrassing for him. But yeah, I'm not surprised people are not stoked about having to go fight a war that they didn't want in the first place. It's not like Ukraine was threatening Russia. You just kind of decided to invade and now they have to go fight for it. Russian President Vladimir Putin's order to mobilize more troops to bolster his struggling military campaign in Ukraine has been rippling across Russia as the military swiftly drafts new recruits and signs of discontent appear to spread. Putin announced the decision Wednesday, framing it as a partial mobilization that he insisted only affects a small percentage of Russians with background in military service. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, ordered an immediate call-up of 300,000 additional troops, even as multiple news reports suggested the real number could be 3 times as many. Alright, so the way they phrased it on TV is that they were basically calling up their reserves. It'd be like if we took the National Guard and used them for something. They're kind of related to the military, but what's actually happening is they're kind of going out there and just being like, oh, you gotta go to Ukraine. And there's stories of people as old as 53 years old getting drafted. I feel like in the United States, theoretically, if things were going horribly, they could get older, but for the most part, they try to draft people in between the ages of 18 and 25. They don't want to have to start pulling fathers away from families and old men to the front line. But it does go to show how desperate Russia is getting for troops that they're willing to be yanking these 53-year-old men out to the front line of Ukraine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with 53-year-old men. We just know that they're not necessarily at the peak of physical ability. They're still strong, but it's not like if I'm in a foxhole and I've got to dig a 6-foot hole to hide from artillery rounds. I would be more excited if someone my age was there than some 52-year-old that complains about his back issues the entire time. Dimitri, I cannot reload my own AK. My hands have arthritis. Plus, dude, at 53, you've lived enough life. I feel like you've earned the right to kind of sit there. You shouldn't have to worry about getting drafted anymore. I know technically it's not even retired, but come on, man, that's pretty old. It's pretty old to just be dragged out of your home and be sent to the front line. Obviously, this is not going to be popular, though. It already was not going to be popular, even if it was standard. But just based on the fact that they said it was only going to be 300,000, it was only going to be trained troops, and now it's just kind of whatever happens, is not going to be popular amongst your people. And I'm sure they already weren't thrilled, especially with that offensive last week. Like I said, I saw a lot of Russian state media, which is usually so far up the Kremlin that, like, their pressure is basically going to turn them into a diamond. They're so far up there. Even they were embarrassed by what went down and how bad Ukraine stomped on them. And people are now trying to get out of there so bad because they don't want to go to Ukraine that it's causing, like, traffic jams and huge issues with the amount of men trying to get out of Russia. Traffic jams in desperation at the border as Russians flee Putin's quote-unquote partial mobilization. The same thing happened in America during Vietnam, like people would go to Canada and dodge the draft. Draft dodging is what it was called, and I'm not surprised that it's happening here. I feel like any country ever that starts a huge mobilization has people that don't want to fight, so they start trying to leave. It'll be interesting to see where they go, though. I know sanctions on Russia have already shut down a lot of international travel. It's not like it would be super easy to get into Europe at this point. I could be wrong, but I feel like most countries kind of kiboshed the whole Russian visa program when this invasion kicked off in the first place. I know a lot of them have been going to Turkey, which is pretty close and has been letting some of them in. But I don't know, what's your plan once you get there? Like, alright, you leave Russia to avoid the draft, you get to this new place, you're not gonna get drafted, but like, what now? Who knows how long this war is gonna last? Putin keeps saying that he's not gonna back down until he takes Ukraine, but at the rate they've been going, that means that the war is just literally gonna go on forever and eventually Russia will just run out of people, or Ukraine. I think this huge mobilization getting all these people is more to boost his negotiating, to like keep those two republics on the east side, but I'm not an expert. Overall, though, it's nuts to see how little support the people actually have for this war. Everyone loves to say that like the Russians just love Vladimir Putin, they'll do anything for him. I think they have to say that. When you're out in public, you can't be like, oh brother, this guy sucks. But the fact enough people are trying to flee being drafted for his war, it's causing traffic jams, tells you everything you need to know about what they really think about what's going on. Vladimir Putin's partial mobilization of citizens for his war in Ukraine has already set in motion sweeping changes for many Russians as drafted men bid their families emotional goodbyes while others attempt to flee, scrambling to make it across land border crossings or buy air tickets out. For many of those leaving, the reason is the same: to avoid being drafted into Putin's brutal and faltering assault on neighboring Ukraine. But the circumstances surrounding their decision and the difficulties of leaving home are deeply personal to each. For Ivan, a man who said he's an officer in Russia's reserves and left the country for Belarus on Thursday, the motivation was clear. I don't support what's going on, so I decided I had to leave right away. I mean, I get people wanting to leave. If you don't agree with a war, it'd probably be hard to go sit in a trench and fight for it. But I feel like if you're gonna run, you might want to go a little bit further than Russia light. Like, isn't Belarus basically propped up by Russia anyways? That dictator wants to be besties with Putin so bad. I also feel like giving news interviews probably isn't the smartest idea. I guess he only gave his first name, and Ivan is probably the equivalent of some dude named like John giving an interview here. Still, man, it's been crazy to watch all of this go down. What's really funny is a year ago, everybody was like, oh man, the Russian military, it's old, but it sure is tough. Like, those are some tough guys. And here they are having to draft people like 10 years out from retirement to go fight a war against a country much smaller than them that they can't seem to beat. And it's not even like it's reached insurgency levels yet. I think it's almost impossible for any organized military to like control a population that doesn't want to be controlled. But considering this is still peer-to-peer warfare, like this is army versus army, you would have thought that the Russian military, that up until this war was thought to be like, oh, one of our biggest rivals, can't even win, man. Like that's kind of embarrassing. I don't know. I don't blame people wanting to leave for the mobilization. But I also don't think that this is necessarily all peachy good news. I think Putin's nuts. I don't think that's really up for discussion. He has control of a country with nuclear weapons. And the more embarrassed he gets, the more desperate he gets. I think the more willing he could be to do some stupid stuff that nobody in a different position would do, mainly because he's already nuts. So I don't know if this is good news. I don't know if it is bad news. It's good news for Ukrainians' offensive in terms of how it was. But even if these 300,000 people get there, are they able to hang on to the territory? There's going to be a lot of changes coming up. But there's your update. I felt like keeping y'all in the loop. I promised I would every week. So there you go. But we've got one more story that's somehow dumber than the NyQuil chicken to get to.